In this video, we'll be taking a look at Ferrania's P30. Ferrania P30 is listed as a panchromatic black and white film, but I found that it leans more towards the ortho side, and we'll talk more about that later. It's an 80 ISO film with high contrast, fine grain, and rich, deep shadows. I normally don't pay too much attention to packaging, but I did like the nice little attention to detail with Ferrania printing their name inside the box. For this test, I developed the film in Xtol at 1:1, and I initially tried the film at ISO 40 because I had heard that some people said they found the film to be slower than ISO 80, but I found that the ISO 40 was a little too bright and it was getting a little overexposed, so I think the ISO 80 is actually just fine. Here are the two side by side, and looking at the shadow detail that I metered for, I think the shadow detail actually looks better on the ISO 80. For the ISO 40, that shadow detail for a Zone 5 is just too bright. Getting back to the orthochromatic nature of the film, I normally don't include a color chart in my example images, but being that the film was kind of questionably panchro or ortho, I wanted to get a photograph of the spectral sensitivity. Taking a look at this, you can tell that the red or anything with a reddish hue to it renders as very dark with this film, so you can see that it is definitely leaning towards the ortho side. This was a Zone 5 exposure, and you can see that the reds are dark, the greens are pretty dark, and all the blues are a lot lighter. So anything that's bluish is going to be a lot more sensitive and is going to be pretty bright on the film. And just as a final point to drive the ortho thing home further, here is a picture of the original handwritten recipe for P30, and you can see that it says Portrait Ortho. In looking at the regular shadow detail of the film, I think you're going to get good shadow detail for ISO 80. As long as you're metering on something that's bluish or greenish, anything that's red, you're going to get something darker than what you metered for, with the film being orthochromatic. So I think overall the shadow detail is actually good. The film is definitely a high contrast film, and you're going to get higher contrast on slower films. And so you can see that the white eyes are very bright, and part of that contrast is going to come from the spectral sensitivity. So the chest area of the costume of Spider-Man is red, so that's going to render as darker, and the abdomen area is blue, so it's going to be lighter, and that gives a nice little boost in contrast. With this film, I think your -1 exposure or your Zone 4 is going to be kind of the sweet spot if you have a lot of red in the image, because the red starts out as dark at a Zone 5, and when you reduce the exposure more, it gets very dark, and it makes the image look really flat if you go too underexposed if there's a lot of red. So I think Zone 4 is kind of that sweet spot for this film. In this image, you can see that at a Zone 3, you still have really great shadow detail, but the amount of red in the image ends up making it very flat overall. Taking a look at the grain on this film, it's extremely fine and practically invisible, and I think the film exhibits excellent sharpness as well. Overall, I think this is a really great film. It's definitely another one that is a special case film. You can't just shoot anything with it, you have to be a little bit more selective, and I really like the look of it. It's got great sharpness, extremely fine detail, and really nice contrast, but you have to be a little bit more selective when you're photographing things of different colors due to the spectral sensitivity. What do you guys think about P30? Have you already shot this film, or would you be willing to give it a try? Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time on The Negative.